Good semantics in HTML refers to the practice of using HTML elements in a way that accurately conveys the meaning and structure of the content on a web page. Semantics in HTML are important because they not only help search engines and assistive technologies understand the content, but also make the code more maintainable and readable for developers. And here are some of the principles for achieving good semantics in HTML. So I've created a template here, and what I will do is I'll create a page using the semantics HTML, and we will use the proper heading hierarchy using heading elements from H1 to H6 and all that. So using semantic elements like the HTML5 introduced a set of semantic elements that provide a clear and meaningful way to structure web content. These includes the header element, the nav, the main, the article, the section, the aside and footer as well. And these elements appropriately define the structure for a web page. In addition to that, there are other elements like the list for structured content. You can use it UL for an ordered list and OL for ordered list, and then there are alt text for images and etc. So let's get started, and what I will do is I'll create a few elements here, starting with an H1. And I'll give a p tag with some text in it. So let's say use semantics So here, since I have an H1 here, the next in the heading hierarchy is the H2. So I want to give an H2 here. And let's give some text, the header element, for example. And p tag, or let's say our top level header element generates a banner landmark. Okay, now in this, as we know, the header element is represented by header and accessible headers. So if I go back to my page here, so it gives me by default, since I've created the CSS prior to this session, that's why you can see these text displaying here in blue color and all that. So since we have given the H1 use of semantics element, and then we give a paragraph here, then this is an H2 with some text, and then it gives the header element as accessible headers. right? So moving along, so this is what we have covered with regards to the header element. The next one we want to look at and how is the header element if we nest the header element in an article. So what will happen for that? So let's see that. So the second section that I want to do that here is H2. Let's say nested header. We want to check for a nested header, and in here, let's say, so what happens is whenever a header is nested, it will not generate a banner landmark whenever it is nested. It's only if it is not nested, if it's outside a nested container, it will create a banner landmark. So let's see an example here. So I'll write some text here. A nested header element does not generate banner landmark. Okay, so to see that, let's create an article, and within that article I want to give a header and H2, for example. Nested headers, and if I give a p tag, on, let's say, all right, so now you can see we have a header here. It is not nested, and this header is nested in an article. So if I go back to our page, how it renders, so you will see here, so we have a nested header, and this header is basically in an inside the article. So this is a different header, and this is a nested header here. So why I'm doing all this is when we run the semantic HTML, or we will browse the page or look at the code, when we run the code, we should be able to clearly identify the semantic elements clearly, because the way they are designed like this. Now so the next one is let's see what are the other elements we have. We have taken the header, then we look at the footer, for example. So in the footer, as we know, footer has the semantic for the footer is footer. So let me give another h2, and I'll call this as the footer element. A paragraph, a top level footer element. So footer element always generates a content info landmark. Okay, so now the footer element is defined by footer, and if I can give so let's go back and check or Okay, let's go back and check this. So in our footer element, we have a footer element here, and it is not nested. This is just a footer. It is displaying. Okay, now the next one, what about, can we nest a footer element? Can we do a nested footer? Right, so nested footer will be basically, you have to have the footer nested. Let's do that. If I want to nest a footer, so I can just create another h2, and let's call this as nested footer. And now for a nested footer, to have to show it, what I want to do is create two sections within the footer. So first section will be, let's create a p tag and give some text and create a section, and within the section I want to create an h2, let's say product 1, and this product 1 has a description, and then what we can do is we can provide a footer here, right? And the footer for it probably can include, let's say, a price tag, a price, 99, and an a tag. Let's give me a hash here, buy now. All right, so what we have done is we have created a nested footer within this section. Now I can also create a similar another section, which I can just copy paste this and call this as a section product 2, and call this as 199 buy now and footer. So what we see here is we have a footer element, and then this is a regular footer element, and then we have two nested footer in here. If I go back to my page, and what I can see is, so I have this footer element, and then within the nested footer I have two different footers that define product 1 and product 2. Okay, so we have seen the header and the footer so far. So the next one that I want to cover is the nav region, the nav element, which is the navigation, and the navigation region could be single navigation, or it could have multiple navigation, or it could have a primary navigation, or it could have a secondary navigation. So nav element is again a default semantic landmark, and to do that, let me go back here, create a main region. Let's say I want to create a main and give a nav in the main region. Let's say h2, the nav element, p tag. A nav element generates a navigation landmark. Okay, so to define nav element, this is nav is the nav element, nav region. So I can also define a primary navigation. For example, if I have another nav, if I can call that as a as a primary navigation, but for that I have to use an ARIA attribute for that. So for example, the nav element can also be given a label via ARIA label, right? So how do we do that is let me create another nav, and so to differentiate between these this nav and the other nav, we have to provide an ARIA label, right? This ARIA label, and I can define what the name of this navigation as a primary navigation. Okay, so when you have multiple navigation, you have to differentiate between those different navigations for the screen reader user. Or you can also provide another ARIA attribute called the ARIA label by, and for that, let's see how we can do that. So if I want to create another one, nav using ARIA label by, so for that I have a nav element again, and then in here what I have to do is I can create an H3. Let's say I create an H3 related links, for example, and within this nav I have to now provide an ARIA label by, and I can call this as related links. And now whenever you provide an ARIA labeled by, it has to be referenced to this element H3 by an ID reference. So I provide an ID, and then the same name, it goes here with an ID as well. So ARIA related links. This is how you link the nav element to the header element, and it is calling that one as a related link when you run the code. So far we have seen the header element, the footer, and the nav element. The next one is we have aside, we have sidebar also. So let's see how we can do a sidebar element too. And for a sidebar or an aside region is basically, you can just provide let's give me an H2 first, just to name an aside element with a p tag. An aside element generates a complementary landmark, right? So aside element creates generates a complementary landmark. So it's you just give it as an aside, and this is how an aside region is created, right? If you have you can also give multiple aside elements, similar way that we have given in ARIA label, or you can provide an ARIA label by for the aside element as well. Okay, and the next one is let's see if we have so we have seen the footer, we have seen the nav, we have seen the aside element, and we can also do a search also. and the search is you can create a search element, or you can create a form with a class and an input type. So let's do that. What I will to do is create an h2 for the search element here, and provide a p tag search element is used to identify a set of form controls, right? For example, okay. Now for a search, you provide a search element, and then within the search I want to create a form, and this form has an action of a hash. Let's give, so within the form I want to create a div, and within the div let's create a label, and a label will be search this site, and for this I can give an input. Input for this type will be search, and I can, so for let's search this site. When you have for search this site, whenever you have an input element, you have to provide an ID calling the search this site. Okay. Since I want to provide a proper CSS for that, let me call this give it as a class of label, and give this class as an input. All right, so we have our simple search form, and we will see how the code has been generated in a minute on the UI. So we have created the section, we have created the section element, we have created the footer, we have created an aside element, and we have created a search form. So if I go back to the code, so we saw that product 1, product 2, footer 2 created. This is the nav element in the region, the nav region, and these are two different nav region, because one is identified by an aria, and this one is identified by an aria labeled by. Okay, this is the assigned element that we have created, and this is the search form or the search element that we had created. All right, so if I want to, so what we have done is we have created this so far. So in our next session, what we will do, we will test these landmarks. We will take a browser extension, a Chrome browser extension, and we will try to create or run that extension on this page to see how the semantic elements are being displayed. Okay, so I'll see you in the next session for browser extension testing on this page on the browser extension.